If this story touches your heart like it touched mine, please hit that like button and subscribe. Every story deserves to be heard. Now, let's begin. The cold hospital bench dug into Sarah Chen's back as she leaned against it, her hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered faintly, as though mocking her state of uncertainty. 8 months pregnant and on the brink of an emergency C-section, Sarah should have been surrounded by support, her husband at her side. Instead, she was alone, staring at the hospital admission forms, trying to hold back tears. "Mrs. Chen, we need your insurance information," the nurse prompted, her voice kind but firm. Sarah's fingers trembled as she gripped her phone. "I'm trying to reach my husband," she whispered, dialing again. She bit her lip to keep it from quivering as the call went straight to voicemail for the 4th time. He handles all of our insurance." The nurse glanced at her sympathetically but offered no reprieve. Sarah's chest tightened. How had it come to this? Just months ago, everything seemed perfect, or at least she thought it was. Another contraction hit, sharp and relentless, pulling her back to the urgency of her situation. She needed to make a decision, fast. 6 years earlier, Marcus Chen wasn't a millionaire. He wasn't even close. He was a young entrepreneur with big ideas and an even bigger smile, pitching his AI security platform to anyone who would listen. Sarah met him during a tech conference where she was presenting her own startup idea. Their connection was immediate, fueled by shared ambition and the kind of chemistry that felt almost cinematic. "I can't believe you came up with that algorithm in 6 months," Marcus had said after her presentation, his eyes sparkling with genuine admiration. "We need more people like you in this industry." Sarah, usually reserved, had blushed. Marcus had a way of making people feel like they were the most important person in the room. When he asked her out for coffee later that day, she didn't hesitate. Their relationship blossomed quickly. Marcus wasn't just charming, he was driven, ambitious, and endlessly supportive. Late-night coding sessions turned into brainstorming dates, and by their 2nd anniversary, they were engaged. Together, they built Marcus's company from the ground up. Sarah handled operations, hiring, and even HR during the company's early days while Marcus focused on securing investors. "We're going to change the world," he had promised her on the night they closed their first funding round, "and we'll do it together." For a while, it felt like they would. The company grew faster than they had anticipated. Marcus's AI platform gained traction with government contracts and high-profile clients, catapulting them into Silicon Valley's spotlight. Suddenly, they were hosting lavish dinner parties and fielding invites to exclusive events. Their modest apartment was replaced by a sleek San Francisco townhouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. But success came at a price. Sarah, who had once been a co-creator in their dream, found herself fading into the background. Marcus became consumed by the business, spending long nights at the office and even longer weekends at networking events. Conversations about shared goals turned into updates about his vision for the company, a vision that increasingly excluded her. "You're my secret weapon," Marcus would say with a smile whenever someone asked about Sarah's role in the company. But the words felt hollow. The deeper he delved into his work, the more distant he became from her. When Sarah found out she was pregnant, she hoped it would bring them closer, but instead, it seemed to drive them further apart. Marcus congratulated her with a perfunctory kiss on the forehead before diving into yet another meeting. "This is great news," he had said, "but we'll have to adjust. I can't afford any distractions right now." By the 7th month of her pregnancy, Sarah started noticing cracks in the foundation of their marriage. Marcus was distracted, secretive, and always on his phone. He missed her doctor's appointments, claiming urgent business matters. He was rarely home for dinner, and when he was, he seemed distant, as though his mind was elsewhere. One night, unable to bear the silence, Sarah confronted him. "Marcus, what's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You've been so distant lately. I feel like I'm raising this baby alone." Marcus looked up from his laptop, his face a mask of irritation. "Sarah, I'm under a lot of pressure. Do you think I want to be away all the time? I'm doing this for us, For the baby. For us? Sarah's voice cracked. You're never here, Marcus. It doesn't feel like you're doing this for us. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. You don't understand the stress I'm under. Just trust me, okay? But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something, and as the months went on, her suspicions grew. On the day of her emergency, Sarah woke up feeling unusually weak. Her head throbbed, and her vision blurred as she tried to stand. The baby kicked faintly, a reminder of the life depending on her. Panic surged through her veins as she called her doctor, who urged her to go to the hospital immediately. When she arrived, the diagnosis was clear: severe preeclampsia. Both she and the baby were at risk if they didn't act quickly. But the surgery came with a hefty price tag, one that Sarah wasn't sure she could cover. "Where's your husband?" the nurse asked as Sarah tried once again to reach Marcus. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Another contraction racked her body, forcing her to double over in pain. Her phone buzzed and she glanced at the screen, hope blooming briefly before it was crushed. In a meeting. Can't talk. It was like a slap in the face. The man who had once promised to build a life with her, to be her partner in everything, was nowhere to be found. "Charge the surgery to my account," a voice cut through the tension like a blade. Sarah turned her head, her breath hitching as she saw who had spoken. Standing at the nurse's station was Elon Musk, his expression a mixture of urgency and calm. He wasn't dressed in a suit or accompanied by an entourage, just a simple t-shirt and jeans. But his presence was unmistakable. "Mr. Musk," the nurse stammered, "this isn't... I mean, do it," Musk said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. "She needs help. Now." Sarah tried to protest, but the words caught in her throat as another wave of pain crashed over her. Musk stepped closer, his gaze meeting hers briefly. "Focus on staying strong," he said softly. "We'll get through this." As the staff wheeled her into the operating room, Sarah's mind swirled with disbelief. The man who should have been at her side had abandoned her, and a complete stranger, one of the most famous men in the world, had stepped in to save her and her baby. The blinding lights of the operating room faded as Sarah drifted back into consciousness. Her body felt heavy, every breath an effort, but the sound of a faint cry pierced through the haze. "Congratulations, Mrs. Chen," a nurse said softly. "You have a beautiful baby girl." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as they placed the tiny bundle in her arms. Rose, she thought. That was the name she and Marcus had picked out months ago, back when things still felt hopeful. The warmth of her newborn daughter filled a void she hadn't realized was so deep. But as the moments passed, the weight of her situation pressed down on her. Where was Marcus? Her daughter's first cry should have been a moment they shared, but he wasn't there. And worse, he hadn't even called to check on her. The nurse cleared her throat, snapping Sarah out of her thoughts. "Mrs. Chen, there's someone here to see you." Before Sarah could respond, Elon Musk stepped into the room. Dressed simply but exuding a quiet authority, he moved closer to her bedside. "How are you feeling?" he asked. Sarah blinked, still struggling to process his presence. I don't know what to say. Thank you doesn't feel like enough." Musk shook his head. "No thanks needed. I was in the right place at the right time." His tone was calm, but there was something else, an edge of knowing, as if he understood more about her situation than she realized. Later that day, while Sarah rested with Rose in her arms, the door to her hospital room opened again. This time it wasn't Musk, but a man she vaguely recognized, one of Marcus's business partners. "Mrs. Chen," he began, his voice hesitant. "I came to talk about Marcus. There are some things you need to know." Sarah's heart sank. She had spent the past few hours trying to convince herself that Marcus's absence was a misunderstanding. Maybe he was dealing with a work emergency. Maybe he didn't realize how serious her condition was. But the look on the man's face told her otherwise. "What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling. The man took a deep breath. Marcus has been withdrawing funds from the company, millions of dollars. We think he's been planning to leave the country." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. "Leave?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Leave where? Why?" The man's gaze fell to the floor. "We don't know for sure, but he's been moving money into offshore accounts and he hasn't been seen at the office in days." Sarah felt the room tilt. The man's words blurred together as a wave of disbelief crashed over her. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. Marcus wasn't perfect, but he wasn't a criminal. He wasn't capable of abandoning her and their unborn child. "Are you saying he's gone?" she asked, her voice rising with panic. "He left me." The man hesitated before nodding. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Chen. I thought you should know." The news of Marcus's betrayal broke like a tidal wave. Within hours, Sarah's name was trending on social media alongside hashtags like #JusticeForSarah and #MarcusTheFraud. Reporters camped outside the hospital, eager to capture any glimpse of the abandoned wife and her newborn daughter. Marcus's actions weren't just personal, they were criminal. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a web of deceit, embezzlement, tax evasion, and even ties to a high-profile influencer. The public was shocked to learn that the man who had once been hailed as a tech visionary was nothing more than a con artist. Amid the chaos, Sarah found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sadness, humiliation, but above all, a deep sense of betrayal. How could the man she had built her life with, the father of her child, abandon them so completely? 2 days later, Elon Musk returned to the hospital, this time with a proposal. "I know this isn't the best time," he began, his tone careful, "but I want to offer you a position at one of my companies." Sarah stared at him, stunned. "What? Why?" "Because you're talented," Musk replied simply. "And because you understand firsthand what happens when systems fail. I think you could bring a unique perspective to our work." Sarah hesitated. The idea of returning to the tech world felt overwhelming, especially with a newborn to care for. But Musk's expression was earnest, and his words struck a chord. She had spent years supporting Marcus's vision, sacrificing her own dreams in the process. Maybe it was time to reclaim her place in the industry. "I'll think about it," she said finally, her voice quiet but resolute. Musk nodded. "Take your time. But know this, you have more strength than you realize, and the world could use people like you." As Sarah began her recovery, the investigation into Marcus's actions reached a boiling point. Footage surfaced of him leaving their home with a suitcase just hours before Sarah was rushed to the hospital. In the video, he could be heard telling a receptionist, "I can't deal with this right now." The clip went viral, cementing his reputation as a heartless opportunist. His mistress, a 22-year-old influencer known for flaunting luxury cars and designer bags, gave a tearful interview claiming she had been deceived by Marcus. "He told me he was single," she sobbed. "I had no idea about his wife or baby." Marcus's company board issued a public statement condemning his actions and pledging full cooperation with authorities. Meanwhile, federal investigators tracked his movements, eventually locating him in Bali. The arrest made headlines worldwide, marking the end of Marcus's carefully curated facade. Despite the media circus, Sarah focused on her daughter and her future. With Musk's encouragement, she decided to accept his offer, returning to the tech world with a newfound sense of purpose. Her first project? Developing a financial oversight system designed to prevent embezzlement and fraud in startups. Drawing on her own experience, Sarah poured her energy into creating a tool that would protect others from the kind of betrayal she had endured. "It's not just about catching bad actors," she explained during a meeting. "It's about building trust and accountability. That's what the industry needs." Sarah stood in front of the nursery window, holding Rose in her arms. The hospital room, though sterile and cold, had become a temporary sanctuary amidst the chaos unfolding outside. Each news alert on her phone brought fresh details about Marcus's betrayal, his financial crimes, and the sheer audacity of his actions. She set her phone down, determined to shield her daughter from the weight of the world for at least a moment. The soft cooing of her newborn grounded her, reminding her that amidst the rubble of her life, she still had something precious to hold on to. On her 4th day in the hospital, a courier arrived with a package. The envelope bore Marcus's familiar handwriting, sending a shiver down Sarah's spine. Inside was a divorce petition and a single handwritten note. "I never wanted this life, the baby, the responsibility. You deserve better." The coldness of the words knocked the air out of her lungs. Sarah sank onto the hospital bed, clutching the letter as tears streamed down her face. All the years she had spent supporting Marcus, sacrificing her dreams for his, reduced to a few heartless sentences. But as the pain coursed through her, a new feeling began to take its place: resolve. Marcus was gone and his betrayal would not define her. She had a daughter to protect and a future to reclaim. Later that evening, Musk visited her again, this time with more than an offer. He had a plan. "You've been through a lot," he said, sitting in the chair beside her bed, "but you have a choice now. You can let this destroy you, or you can use it to build something stronger." Sarah looked at him, skeptical. "You think I can just bounce back from all of this? Start over like none of it happened?" "I'm not saying it'll be easy," Musk replied, his tone steady. "But I've seen what happens when people let betrayal define them. Don't let Marcus's failure rob you of your potential." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "I'm not offering you a job out of pity, Sarah. I'm offering it because you're brilliant, and because I believe in second chances." For the first time in days, Sarah felt a spark of hope. Musk's belief in her wasn't just a lifeline. It was a challenge, and she was ready to rise to it. 3 weeks later, Sarah walked into her first meeting at Musk's company. The office buzzed with energy, a stark contrast to the suffocating environment Marcus had cultivated at his own firm. Her new project was ambitious, a financial oversight system designed to detect and prevent fraud in startups. Drawing from her own experience, Sarah poured her knowledge and pain into the work, determined to create something that would help others avoid the traps she had fallen into. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah's confidence grew. Her colleagues respected her expertise, and Musk's mentorship pushed her to think bigger. For the first time in years, she felt like more than just someone's wife. She was a creator, a leader, and a mother. Meanwhile, the world watched as Marcus's empire crumbled. His arrest in Bali became a media spectacle, with cameras capturing his disheveled appearance as he was escorted off the plane in handcuffs. The charges against him were extensive: embezzlement, tax evasion, and fraud. As the trial unfolded, more details of his deceit came to light. He had siphoned millions from his company, funneled money into offshore accounts, and spent lavishly on his mistress. Sarah followed the trial from a distance, focusing on her work and her daughter. But when the verdict was announced, 20 years in federal prison, she felt a small sense of closure. Justice had been served, and Marcus's betrayal no longer hung over her like a shadow. 1 year after Rosa's birth, Sarah stood on stage at a tech conference, her daughter strapped to her chest in a baby carrier. The audience, a mix of investors, entrepreneurs, and engineers, listened intently as Sarah shared her story. "Success isn't just about innovation," she said, her voice steady and clear. "It's about integrity, trust, and lifting each other up when systems fail us. That's what we're building here. Not just technology, but accountability." The crowd erupted in applause. In the front row, Musk nodded approvingly, a proud smile on his face. The financial oversight system Sarah had developed was already being implemented across multiple tech companies, protecting startups from the kind of fraud Marcus had orchestrated. Her work was making a tangible difference, and the tech community recognized her as a leader and innovator in her own right. In the months that followed, Sarah continued to thrive. She started a foundation to support single parents in tech, using part of the settlement from Marcus's frozen assets to fund daycare programs and career mentorships. Her viral Medium article titled "Betrayal, Resilience, and Building Something New" became a rallying cry for others facing similar struggles. "Sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead us to our true purpose," she wrote. "I thought I was living my dream supporting someone else's vision, but I've learned that my real dream was waiting for me to create it." Rose, now toddling around the house, became a constant source of joy and motivation. Sarah often marveled at her daughter's resilience, seeing in her a reflection of her own strength. 2 years after Marcus's downfall, Sarah Chen had become a symbol of resilience and innovation in the tech world. Her financial oversight system was now standard in more than 200 startups, and her foundation, the Rose Initiative, had expanded its reach, offering resources and mentorship to single parents across the country. On a chilly autumn morning, Sarah sat in her bright, sunlit office overlooking the San Francisco skyline. Rose, now a vivacious toddler, played on a colorful mat nearby, giggling as she stacked wooden blocks. The sound of her laughter was a constant reminder of how far they had come. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Sarah looked up to see one of her assistants standing there, holding a thick envelope. "This just came for you," the assistant said, placing the envelope on Sarah's desk. The return address caught her attention immediately: Federal Bureau of Prisons. Later that evening, after putting Rose to bed, Sarah sat down with the envelope in her lap. She debated whether to open it, her fingers tracing the edges as a storm of emotions swirled within her. Curiosity won out. The letter inside was handwritten, its tone surprisingly subdued. "Sarah, I've had 2 years to reflect on everything I've done. Every choice I made, every lie I told, it all led to this cell. I won't ask for your forgiveness because I don't deserve it, but I want you to know I regret the way I treated you, the way I abandoned our family. You were always better than I deserved. I see that now. I hope you found happiness and that Rose grows up knowing how incredible her mother is. Marcus." Sarah sat back, the letter trembling in her hands. The words didn't undo the damage Marcus had caused, but they carried a weight she hadn't expected. A glimpse of the man he might have been if greed and ambition hadn't consumed him. Instead of letting the letter drag her into the past, Sarah channeled her emotions into her work. She began expanding the Rose Initiative to include counseling services for families affected by corporate fraud and financial abuse. She also partnered with other tech leaders, including Musk, to develop stricter industry standards for financial accountability. "People often focus on the perpetrators," Sarah said during a keynote speech at a tech ethics conference, "but we rarely talk about the ripple effects, the families left behind, the trust that's shattered. That's where real change needs to happen." Her words struck a chord, sparking a movement within the industry. Companies began adopting policies inspired by Sarah's work, creating safer environments for employees and their families. One afternoon, while attending a charity gala for her foundation, Sarah found herself face-to-face with someone she hadn't expected to see again: Marcus's former mistress. The young woman, now far removed from her influencer persona, approached nervously, clutching a small donation envelope. "Mrs. Chen," she began, her voice shaky, "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything." Sarah studied her for a moment, noticing the dark circles under her eyes and the nervous way she fidgeted with her hands. The glamour and arrogance that had defined her public persona were gone, replaced by something that resembled humility. "I didn't know what Marcus was planning," the woman continued, "and when it all came out, I lost everything too." For a brief moment, Sarah felt a flicker of pity, but she also felt a sense of closure. "Thank you," she said simply. "I hope you found a better path." The encounter left Sarah reflective. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was a reminder of how far she had come and how much further she wanted to go. As Rose grew, so did Sarah's vision for the future. She began mentoring young entrepreneurs, sharing her story not just as a cautionary tale, but as a blueprint for resilience and reinvention. One of her mentees, a bright young engineer named Lily, reminded Sarah of herself in her early career. Ambitious, curious, and brimming with ideas, Lily often sought Sarah's guidance on navigating the complexities of the tech world. "You've been through so much," Lily said one evening during a late brainstorming session. "How do you stay so focused?" Sarah smiled, her gaze distant. "Because I know what's at stake, and I've learned that the worst moments in life don't define you. How you rise from them does." 5 years after Marcus's betrayal, Sarah stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Rose Center, a state-of-the-art daycare and education hub for the single parents in tech. The facility, funded by donations and Sarah's own contributions, was the culmination of years of hard work and determination. As she cut the ribbon, the crowd erupted in applause. Rose, now a precocious 5-year-old, ran up to her mother, beaming with pride. "Mommy, we did it!" she exclaimed, throwing her arms around Sarah. "Yes, we did," Sarah whispered, holding her daughter close. The story of Sarah Chen's rise from betrayal to empowerment became a beacon of hope for countless others. Her name was synonymous with resilience, her work a testament to the power of turning pain into purpose. Marcus, still serving his sentence, faded into obscurity. His name was a footnote in Sarah's journey, a reminder of where she had been but not where she was going. As Sarah tucked Rose into bed that night, her daughter looked up at her with wide, curious eyes. "Mommy, are you happy now?" she asked. Sarah smiled, her heart full. "Yes, sweetheart, I am." And for the first time in years, she truly meant it. Months after the grand opening of the Rose Center, Sarah's life settled into a rhythm that felt equal parts fulfilling and exhausting. Between running her foundation, mentoring young entrepreneurs, and raising Rose, her days were a whirlwind. But each night, as she tucked her daughter into bed, she felt a profound sense of peace, a stark contrast to the chaos of the past. One morning, as Sarah reviewed the quarterly reports for her foundation, her assistant knocked on the door with a peculiar expression. "There's someone here to see you," she said cautiously. "He doesn't have an appointment, but he insists it's important." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Who is it?" Her assistant hesitated. "It's Marcus." Sarah's heart sank at the mention of his name. She hadn't seen or spoken to Marcus since the trial. Her immediate instinct was to send him away, but curiosity, and perhaps a need for closure, made her reconsider. "Send him in," she said, her voice firm. When Marcus entered the room, Sarah barely recognized him. The confident, sharp-dressed man she once knew was gone, replaced by someone thinner, older, and visibly burdened. His eyes met hers, filled with an unfamiliar mixture of guilt and humility. "Sarah," he began, his voice unsteady, "thank you for agreeing to see me." She gestured for him to sit, but said nothing. Her arms crossed as she waited for him to explain. "I know I'm the last person you want to hear from," he continued, his gaze fixed on the floor. "But I've had a lot of time to think about what I did to you, to Rose, to everything we built." Sarah's voice was calm but edged with steel. "And what exactly do you want from me, Marcus? An apology? Forgiveness?" "I don't expect forgiveness," he admitted. "I just wanted to see how you're doing, to know if you're okay." She laughed bitterly. "You've been gone for years, Marcus. You abandoned me when I needed you the most, and now you want to check in? You don't get to do that." His shoulders slumped, and for a moment he looked utterly defeated. "You're right," he said. "I don't deserve to ask. I just needed to say I'm sorry, face to face." Sarah stared at him, searching for the man she had once loved and finding only fragments. "Marcus, I've moved on. I've built a life for myself and for Rose, a life you're not part of. And that's the way it has to stay." He nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "I understand. I wanted you to know that I'm proud of you. Everything you've done. You've become everything I wasn't strong enough to be." His words hung in the air, unexpected and strangely bittersweet. Sarah felt a flicker of pity but quickly pushed it aside. She had given him enough of her energy, her love, and her forgiveness. This moment wasn't about him. It was about her reclaiming the narrative. "Goodbye, Marcus," she said, her voice steady. "I wish you the best, but this is the last time we'll speak." As he left her office, Sarah felt an odd sense of relief. The chapter she hadn't realized was still open had finally been closed. In the weeks following her encounter with Marcus, Sarah threw herself into her work with renewed focus. The Rose Initiative began collaborating with international organizations, expanding its reach to underserved communities around the world. Sarah traveled frequently, sharing her story and helping other single parents find their footing in the tech world. One of her most impactful projects came during a visit to a rural town in Kenya, where she partnered with local leaders to establish a technology hub for young women. The center provided access to education, mentorship, and job opportunities, empowering them to break cycles of poverty and dependency. "This isn't just about technology," Sarah said during the center's opening ceremony. "It's about giving people the tools to rewrite their stories, just like I did." Back in San Francisco, Sarah received an unexpected invitation: a seat on the board of directors for one of Silicon Valley's largest venture capital firms. The offer was a testament to her growing influence, but it also came with significant challenges. Joining the board would mean stepping into a world where Marcus's betrayal was still a whispered, cautionary tale. She deliberated for days, consulting trusted colleagues and friends, including Musk. "You've earned this," Musk told her over coffee one morning. "Don't let fear hold you back. If anyone can change the way this industry operates, it's you." Inspired by his words, Sarah accepted the position, her first order of business, proposing stricter oversight policies for venture-backed startups, ensuring that founders couldn't exploit their companies the way Marcus had. Her initiatives faced resistance from some board members, but Sarah's persistence and her story proved powerful. Within months, the firm adopted her recommendations, setting a new standard for accountability in the industry. As the years passed, Sarah's impact only grew. By the time Rose was 8, she was old enough to understand the basics of her mother's story. One evening, as they sat on the couch reading together, Rose looked up and asked, "Mommy, why do people say you're a hero?" Sarah smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Because I didn't give up, even when things got hard, and because I wanted to make the world better for you." Rose beamed. "When I grow up, I want to help people too." "You will, sweetheart," Sarah said, pulling her daughter close. "You already are." Decades later, Sarah retired from her career, leaving behind a legacy that had reshaped the tech world. She spent her days mentoring young women, tending to her garden, and watching Rose thrive as a successful entrepreneur in her own right. On a quiet afternoon, as she flipped through an old photo album, Sarah paused at a picture of her younger self standing beside Marcus during the early days of their company. She felt no anger, no sadness, only gratitude for the journey that had brought her to where she was. Life had not gone the way she had planned, but it had led her to something far greater: a purpose, a legacy, and a love that no betrayal could ever take away. As Sarah transitioned into her later years, her journey became a source of inspiration for countless individuals. Her story was featured in books, documentaries, and conferences, cementing her status as a pioneer of resilience and innovation. But Sarah remained grounded, focused on what truly mattered: her family and the lives she could continue to impact. One rainy afternoon, while Sarah was working on a speech for an upcoming global tech summit, her phone buzzed. The caller ID displayed an unfamiliar number, but something nudged her to answer. "Hello?" she said, her tone curious. "Mrs. Chen, this is Warden Ellis from the federal penitentiary where Marcus Chen is serving his sentence." The voice was steady but serious. Sarah's stomach tightened. She hadn't thought about Marcus in years. "What's this about?" "I'm calling because Marcus is critically ill. He requested to see you. He said it was important." The words hung in the air. Sarah's mind raced with conflicting emotions. She had closed the chapter on Marcus long ago, but this call reopened it in a way she hadn't expected. After much deliberation, Sarah decided to visit Marcus. Not for his sake, but for her own sense of closure. She needed to hear whatever he had to say to ensure there was nothing left unsaid. The prison walls loomed large as she entered the visitation area. Marcus sat at a table looking frail and worn. His once pristine posture had collapsed under the weight of time and regret. When he saw her, his face lit up with a flicker of gratitude. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice hoarse, "thank you for coming." She sat across from him, her expression calm but guarded. "What do you want, Marcus?" He took a shaky breath. "I don't have much time left. I needed you to know that everything you built, your foundation, your work, it's incredible, and I'm sorry I didn't see your worth when it mattered." Sarah's chest tightened. She had spent years waiting for these words, but now that they were here, they felt almost anticlimactic. "You're right," she said. "You didn't see my worth, but I did, and that's why I'm here today, not for you, but for myself, to remind myself how far I've come." Marcus nodded, his eyes glassy. "I hope Rose knows how lucky she is to have you." "She does," Sarah replied, standing up. "Goodbye, Marcus." As she walked away, a weight lifted from her shoulders. She realized that while Marcus had been a part of her story, he no longer held any power over her. Months later, Sarah stood on stage at the Global Tech Summit in Geneva, addressing a room filled with the brightest minds in the world. Her speech wasn't just about technology. It was about the human stories behind innovation. "Resilience isn't just bouncing back from failure," she said, her voice resonating through the hall. "It's building something stronger in the face of it. It's using every setback as a stepping stone toward a greater purpose." The audience erupted into applause as Sarah concluded her speech. Among the attendees was her daughter, Rose, now a successful entrepreneur in her own right. Watching her mother with pride, she felt inspired to carry forward the legacy Sarah had built. Years later, the Rose Initiative had grown into a global movement, providing education, mentorship, and resources to millions of single parents and underserved communities. Sarah's influence could be seen in every corner of the tech world, from the ethical guidelines startups followed to the countless success stories of individuals who had benefited from her programs. At the heart of it all was Rose, who had taken over as CEO of the foundation. She often reflected on her mother's journey, drawing strength from the example Sarah had set. "She taught me that we're not defined by what happens to us," Rose said during a speech at the Rose Initiative's 25th anniversary gala. "We're defined by how we rise from it." In her twilight years, Sarah lived quietly in a seaside town, surrounded by the people she loved. She spent her days mentoring young women, writing her memoirs, and watching Rose thrive. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Sarah sat on her porch with a cup of tea. Her phone buzzed with a notification, a news article about a new initiative inspired by her work. A smile spread across her face as she read the headline. Her life had come full circle, and though the journey had been fraught with challenges, it had led her to a place of peace and fulfillment. As the waves crashed against the shore, Sarah closed her eyes and let the sound of the ocean wash over her. She had turned pain into purpose, betrayal into strength, and an ending into a beginning. And that was enough.